Brilliant. Well, I think that pretty much sums up the race. I'm going to just shout out the names of the top 10 because, well, just so everyone is aware of where everyone finished. The race ended obviously on lap 63, completely the full roster of laps. It went Verstappen first, Hamilton came second, Lando Norris, woohoo, came third. We had Charles Leclerc fourth, Sainz fifth, Ricciardo sixth, Gasly seventh, eighth was Stroll, Ocon was ninth, and then the two-time champion Alonso was 10th. So it was a great race, really exciting, loads to talk about, and obviously we've made sure we try and touch on most of the subjects during our race review. That's why it's probably taken about an hour and a half to do so. Let's move on to our guests, because obviously we have got you here now, Glenn. You're the editor-in-chief of The Race. Now, The Race, it kind of popped up out of nowhere last year at the start of the season. Where did it come from? You were an Autosport journalist / editor / many job roles. I looked at your LinkedIn earlier to check. So what happened? What made you join the race or start the race? I don't know, kind of the roots of it.
Yeah, I mean, I just had the opportunity to join it when it was starting up. Just an opportunity to start something with a clean sheet of paper. Spot what we thought was a gap in the market, mainly aimed at giving more to the hardcore fans, giving them more depth, more explanation, trying to tell deeper, better stories for them. And yeah, that's an exciting opportunity. If that comes along, the chance to kind of, in a way, do it your way, or have a greater input. With a small, tight-knit team. We're operating on a limited resources and a limited budget that became even more limited shortly after we launched because of pandemic. But it's just a really exciting opportunity. As you mentioned, I've been at kind of Autosport and in that world for a very long time. Had a great time there. That was always my ambition. I was a subscriber to the magazine long before I did work experience or anything like that there. Wow. So it was incredible to be there for as long as I was. And it was always going to take a pretty special, unique opportunity to prize me away from it. And that's what this has proven to be so far. And yeah, we're just over a year into it now. It did kind of pop up from nowhere. Yeah, it came together quite quickly. But I think that I think we found a place. I hope we found a place.
Absolutely.
And we're still evolving all the time and trying to get better, trying to think of new things to do and new ways to interact with the audience as well. So yeah, we're having a lot of fun. And what kind of makes my day, this sounds so cheesy, but it happened today. So it makes sense to share it, is that every now and then we do something and then I just get a message from someone going, love this job. And that's why we all do these things. That's why you guys run this page and this community and this brand that you've got going as well. We're all here for the same reason. We're passionate about this sport that we love, and we all want to find ways to convey that and to interact with other people about it. And that's what we're trying to do. And yeah, we're pretty happy with how it's going so far.
Yeah, it is. It's one of our sources of information. We head over there, as obviously you have a stock of little websites that are saved in your browser. You're certainly one of the top ones, and Autosport as well. Funnily enough, where you previously came from. You've got a great team, though, haven't you? You've managed to grab people from many different areas. That it's all big names. Were you involved in any of that, or were you kind of just brought on as one of the big names as well?
Well, I wasn't one of the big names, but I wasn't. I was kind of.
You're being modest. You were.
I was recruited rather than doing the recruiting. Okay. I think I was one of the earliest members of staff, and yeah, was obviously consulted and from that point. But a lot of it was also just putting job adverts out and seeing who came forward, and some people we maybe didn't think would be available came forward and expressed an interest. And we have got a great team. Thank you for that, and I agree. And I also think that just looking at F1, for example, we've got Mark Hughes, Ed Straw, Scott Mitchell. They all bring something quite different to the table that they specialize in different areas of the stuff they write. They have different contacts within the paddock. They have different things they are good at. So they all complement each other quite well also. So you don't, when you have what is still quite a small team compared to a lot of our rivals, you don't necessarily want a load of people who are all good at the same thing.
Yeah, sure.
And I think you need that kind of dynamic where everybody complements each other. And I think we've got that. And that was really important because we knew our head count was going to be limited. So you've got to make sure that you spread yourself as wide as possible with the people you get in. I'd love to by now for us to have been trying to add some more people.
Yeah.
But I think any sort of investment or expansion is probably on hold.
COVID's put pay to a lot of that, unfortunately, hasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So we're all just grateful, I think, that we're still able to work and still have, I think we're all very lucky that F1 popped back into our lives last July, and that we're hopefully getting a full season this season as well. So that's the main thing. We've got something to talk about.
Yeah, well, and if they all go but like Imola, hopefully that will keep lots and lots of content on our pages, on your pages, and on our pages as well. Now you also do a couple of other things as well. You've got your own podcast, Bring Back the V10s. As I say, Coops is an avid listener of that podcast. Yes. How long have you been doing that, and what motivated you to do that?
It's been going just over a year. We started it in March 2020. We've done 3 series. Series 3 is just finished. Series 4 will be back in the summer. Deliberately vague to buy myself quite a big window for when it will come back. The motivation for doing it was obviously that was the era where I fell in love with the sport. I started watching it as a 3-year-old in 1989. That's our starting point when they got rid of the turbos. And so we go 89 to 2005. And the motivation really was that I listened to other podcasts about other sports that do similar sort of things and look back at eras when I was really into those sports. And it's great to hear not just the stories retold, but the new things you can find out or the things that got forgotten. So it was kind of a template I wanted to follow. And even before we start speaking to people again and telling stories that haven't been told before, just going back through the archives and all the things that have been forgotten over time, because all of our memories, our favorite memories of any sport, and let's look at F1 in particular, they get boiled down to certain flashpoints. There are certain moments we remember vividly, but you don't remember a lot of the other stuff around it. And my favorite episodes, I think, are when we focus on a race weekend rather than a long storyline. Because you go all over the place. 1 minute you talk about what Jordan were doing, then you're talking about what Williams are up to, and then you're talking about what Bernie Ecclestone was doing at the time, and the FIA, and you cover so many things in hopefully an hour and a half, and it's really good fun to look back. All the guys on the team get a kick out of being part of it, and the main thing is the audience have bought into it. The numbers are great, and what I love is when people discover it, almost every week, our second most listened to episode that we've ever done will always be episode 1. So I get the impression that people find it and then straight away go back to the start. So it's great to see that so many people do that, because you don't need to listen to them as they come out, because the story will be as true in a few months' time as it is now, because all the stories are so old. So I love that element as well. I love the interaction we get from people. I mentioned we finish each series with a Q&A from our listeners. And the first year we did it, I think I had like 5 or 6 questions left over at the end. I had 100 left over at the end of this series.
Wow.
So the level of interaction we get now is amazing.
That's great.
And it's because of that I can justify spending so much time on it. At least that's what I tell myself.
And that's what you tell the wife.
Yeah.
That's the same for here. Exact same thing for us. Have you got any tips for us? As we are a fledgling podcast, hopefully we're doing something right. What would you say is your number one lesson from doing the podcast yourself for other people maybe wanting to do a podcast?
Yes, that's a really interesting question, because I never hosted anything before. I'd occasionally appear on Autosport episodes and even some of the race F1 episodes. If Ed Straw needed someone up from the subs bench to fill a space.
Yeah.
I think, just be as interesting, as impactful, as opinionated as you can, but always say stuff that you're willing to back up. You've got to be you can't just say something to get a reaction if you're not prepared to back it up when you're challenged. And be sharp as well. I think I have to now bring on some of our other podcasts that we're doing, and it's sort of get in, make your point, and get out. And we all struggle with that. I struggle with it. I've probably struggled with it tonight, to be honest, because we've been here for ages now. But that's born out of our love and our knowledge for it as well.
We'll blame Coops for that. We always do anyway, so we may as well blame him
well,
tonight.
I'm happy to take the blame this week.
I've not talked that much today. I mean, while I'm actually now talking, I will say that one of the articles I wrote actually came as a direct response to listening to one of your Bring Back V10 episodes, and that was the 97 Jerez episode. And it's funny you mentioned actually that you that came up, because I always remember watching the qualifying and the three cars with exactly the same time, but I never connected everything else. Like, I didn't connect in my head because I was quite young. It was 97. I didn't connect. That was the qualifying that led to Schumacher hitting Villeneuve, and then the kind of gentleman's agreement with the McLarens and the Williams. And when I listened to that, and I was like, oh, wait a minute. And to be honest, and I said this to Tiller when I let him read it once I'd done it, it's probably the one article I'm probably the most proud of, and it's almost one of the most popular ones out there. And that came as a direct response to listening to you guys. Because again, as you say, it's going back to things I don't remember, some of the things in the early 80s, and then I'm actually doing what you've just said. I've went back and downloaded the first episode, and I'm actually currently listening to the Prost being fired by Ferrari episodes, the first two. So it's for me, being a kind of novice writer and listening to this and anything like that. And the race is the one thing that I tend to go to first, behind our podcast, obviously, for obvious reasons. But yeah, it's and I was actually quite nervous having you on, because I've listened to that much of you on the V10s. I was going, oh, when's coming on? So,
have you got a question though, Coops? Let's ask him a question. Yeah.
Let's have a question. Have you? The one thing curious to ask is, I've grew up obviously through the 80s and 90s. Have you noticed a big change in how fans consume their kind of media, as it were, from now the way the race is solely website and podcast to the way it was back in the day?
Yeah, I mean that change has been going on for a long time, and I kind of. Really, that's been going on in this century. I lived and worked through it at Autosport, where as I said, my ambition was to work for that magazine. The first job I got there was a junior role on the website, but still then the ambition was to get to the magazine in the mid 2000s, and that was where I made my next move. And then sort of 6 years later, you find yourself wanting to get back to the website because that's the way it's going. And even at that point, social media wasn't what it is now. YouTube wasn't what it is now. That's a huge part of our kind of awareness of who we are and what we do, is people discovering us through the YouTube channel. And yeah, it's going to keep evolving, because technology keeps coming up with different ways for us to tell stories and to reach an audience. You mentioned at the very start of the show all the various places people can find you guys. Once upon a time, let's say 15 years ago, you'd just run a website. You maybe bought a URL or whatever, and you guys would run a website or a blog, and that would be it. But there's so many more ways available to us now to talk to the audience and like-minded fans as well. So I think it's changed massively. And I think with all sports, that's why I don't get too bogged down in the obsession of, say, TV ratings, because not everybody now sits there and watches every session live on TV. But that doesn't mean they've checked out of F1 entirely. You've only got to see the millions of views the official F1 channel gets on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people have more choice than they've ever had before. And what we need is more seasons like the one that we think we're getting this year, where it's worth sticking around and worth paying a lot more attention to throughout the whole season. And it is good to be sat here and not assume that by sort of 3/4 of the way through the year, Lewis will be notching up his 8th championship.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. It'll go down to the wire. Sponge, have you got a question for Glenn today?
Yeah, just a quick question. Why Villeneuve?
That's a really good question. No, nobody ever asks me that, which doesn't really make sense because it's not the most obvious. But I do have an answer. It was when he was in IndyCar. So I started watching IndyCar properly because Mansell went there in '93. Mansell was a bit rubbish in '94 as reigning champion. And I noticed there was this name that I recognised on the grid, which was Villeneuve. I knew a bit about his dad, who was obviously before my time, but I just took an interest. I was attracted to the name because of Gilles. And then he was quite exciting in IndyCar. He won a race as a rookie in '94. He was the only driver to get anywhere near the dodgy Penske's at Indy that year. And then he won the championship the next year and came to F1 to drive for Williams, who were my favourite team at the time because I'd been a Mansell and Hill fan before that. And why am I still a fan today is probably the better question. And I guess the answer to that is loyalty.
He's certainly had a few controversial opinions over the last few years. Has that tested your loyalty?
I don't place too much weight in those, mainly because particularly when he maybe spoke more when I was still at Autosport, the reaction on social media would be, no one cares what he thinks and all that. But then you look at our analytics and you go, well, loads of people care apparently what he thinks. So it attracts a certain type of the audience. But in a sport where so many people are so guarded with what they say, then obviously there is a place for people like that. You don't have to agree with what he says. I quite often don't. I know that most of the time he's being controversial for the sake of it, but it entertains enough people, it seems. So
it goes back to that old saying, you do the talking on the track, and he certainly did that, didn't he, when he was racing? So
yeah, exactly. And I think
he had more than enough to back up what he was saying back in the day.
Yeah, I think that gets lost now because of the way his F1 career petered out and all the stuff he did afterwards. And people go, well, why is he still around? Why is he kind of turning up anywhere that he can make a quick buck? But that shouldn't detract from how good he was in the mid-90s. Because if you combine what he did in IndyCar with what he did in his first few years in F1, he was a special talent at that time, and at his peak was excellent and very entertaining.
Do you think that Villeneuve was a bit like Alonso in the 90s, where he made the right decisions at the wrong time? Because I watched Villeneuve at the time he came into Formula 1 as well, and he always seemed like someone who had more, he was deserving of more championships and more wins in Formula 1 than he got. I think
obviously the BAR decision was disastrous for his career. There's always been talk that he could have gone to McLaren. I don't see how he could have driven for Ron Dennis. I don't think that would work at all. But yeah, we discussed this on a recent episode of Bring Back V10s actually, that in 98, 99 and 2000 he was still driving brilliantly. He didn't have the cars worthy of his talent at that point. And then new drivers started to come in. People like Montoya came along and were picking up drives. We had that whole class of 2001, didn't we? Where Alonso, Raikkonen and Montoya, and who could possibly forget Enrique Benoldi? Doing the grid. So yeah, he put himself out of position on the kind of chessboard of the driver market, as you say, much like Alonso has. And if anything, Alonso probably made more missteps than Villeneuve got the opportunity to, because Villeneuve made one really bad step and his career never properly recovered.
I mean, you have mentioned Montoya. I'm kind of similar to you in that I don't follow a driver anymore because my driver was Montoya, and I followed him in the kart championship, but watched him over here and wished he did a wee bit more. But he was fun when he was here. And I mean, he's my favourite driver. He did bin it behind the safety car at one point. to see the camera shoot to Ron Dennis, particularly not impressed with it. That was quite a scary shot.
So let's talk about your career highlight then. Just pick if you can pick one. Have you got a career highlight that you want to chat about today?
It's been a great career so far. I've done all kinds of things. I've met great drivers, met lots of world champions, covered lots of great races and championships, been to a lot of great circuits. Honestly, my favorite interview was one I did with Villeneuve, where we did the Race of My Life feature for Autosport. So he had a free pick. What do you want to talk about? He chose Indy 95, winning the Indy 500. He said it was a toss-up between that and Jerez, but it was Indy for him. And I spent, I don't know, half an hour, 40 minutes just having him describe in great detail winning the Indy 500 from a 2-lap penalty. You know, he was 2 laps down. They call it the Indy 505. And to have him describe it all back to me and to remember what it was like to be a 9-year-old kid supporting him and watching that, and then thinking like, here you are 17 years later or whatever it was at the time, having him then talk you all through it. I was like, this is cool.
Dream come true.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's almost a bit of a cliche answer, but you can't look past something like that. That is dream come true stuff. Absolutely incredible, and makes you really appreciate the opportunities that come up through a career like this. You know, very, very lucky.
So conversely, have you ever said the wrong thing in an interview and consider it as a low point in your career? Sorry for being controversial, maybe.
There's quite an obvious one that was my first experience of internet backlash in 2011 with Michael Schumacher.
Right.
We were at testing at Jerez, and every indication we had was that Mercedes, this was Mercedes' first proper car. Because you remember, the 2010 car really was the 2010 undeveloped Brawn. I always call it the Brawn BGP 002. So their first proper car in 2011 was supposed to be when they made the step, and they didn't. I was fresh off of covering the DTM, so I had some contacts at Mercedes. And during the day, Schumacher went really quick on soft tyres, and I got word that the nod had come from Germany to set a quick time, to get the German press off their backs. And I found a way to put that to Schumacher at the end of the day, and the scowl he gave me. He wouldn't properly turn his face to look at me. He kept looking at whoever he was talking before, but he just turned his eyes, and his face, I vividly remember his face. And he gave me quite a dressing down. And then his manager, after he left, his manager told me that I don't understand testing and Formula One and all this sort of thing. And I sort of muttered under my breath that I did. But then for the first 4 races or something of the season, Mercedes were qualifying 1.9 seconds off a pace. So we were right. But that story doesn't quite end there. It was a shame that my main interaction with Michael Schumacher was, a legend of the sport, was so negative. But I got to put that right in Valencia 2012. I covered that race for Autosport. And all weekend, Michael's sessions clashed with Lewis Hamilton's at McLaren. Right. So all the journalists were going to the Lewis McLaren sessions, and nobody was there to talk to Michael except me and one American journalist. So I got in trouble with his manager again on the Friday, because the TV crews doing their interviews behind a garage. And then as he went to walk off, I asked a question, and he stopped and he answered it, and he gave me the time. But his manager then said, "This is for TV. You're just supposed to stand there and record it. You can't ask a question." I thought, well, Michael didn't seem to mind. But then I went to all his sessions through the rest of the weekend, and he was on really good form. He was really relaxed. He saw the funny side of no one being there to talk to him. The other guy asked him a question at one point, and he gave an answer. And then the guy said, "Can you elaborate on that a bit more?" And Michael went, "Of course, ask me another question about it," which I really liked. And yeah, he was really relaxed. And it was obviously the perfect end to the weekend, was that he got the only podium of his comeback that weekend. And I was really pleased for him, because I'd seen a different side to him that weekend, and it was great to see him get a result worthy of mention and to get his only podium. So yeah, my worst experience was with him, but I had a more pleasant experience the following year, which I was kind of relieved about.
Yeah, brilliant. That sounds good. It's really, really interesting and really good to hear these kind of anecdotes, because you don't really hear what the drivers are like behind the scenes, and it's good to have those first-hand experiences. I'm trying to think. Did we have any other questions that you wanted to ask, boys? I'll go to Sponge. Have you got a question?
Oh, that's my question, I think. That's the only one I had about Villeneuve.
Okay. 𝐃𝐫𝐢𝐯𝐬?
Just the last one. Where would you like to see the race in maybe the next 3-4 years? What's your kind of idea as an editor-in-chief? What's your plan?
Want to keep growing the audience. Want to break even and become profitable. We're running a tight ship on that front, because this industry is difficult to make work from a business point of view, and part of our mantra from the start was to make sure that we were lean, so that the opportunities that are there will be enough to make it work as a business. Want to keep growing, and the important thing is that we don't, obviously not been around very long, but we don't go stale. We don't just find a formula that we think works and then stick with it. The industry will keep evolving. Things we haven't thought of or we aren't aware of now will become pivotal and central to what we're all doing in years to come. So you've got to be agile and ready to react to that sort of thing. And I guess I'd quite like 1 million subscribers to our YouTube channel.
That'd be great, wouldn't it? Yeah, everyone go over to the Race's YouTube channel, the -race. I'm told you,
The
you have
race.
to remember.
Don't forget the hyphen. Don't forget the hyphen. That's what it is.
Are you going to any of the races, the Formula One races this year? Obviously, I know it's going to be quite a close paddock. I don't know if you've got access. Are you going to go and see any of them?
Not at the moment, because obviously with numbers being limited, the other guys are more important to have there than I am. And then we'll see when things start to properly open up. It'd be good to get back in there and just see people face to face and experience it all. So yeah,
it is a tough time, isn't it? For especially a person in your position. Obviously, we're doing it as fans, so we kind of claim what we can from wherever we can get it. But you guys, as actual journalists, it's a tough time to get those sorts of stories firsthand.
Yeah, it is really difficult for the guys who rely on personal relationships and first-hand information and trying to get that. Probably there have been some benefits in that maybe people are a bit more accessible through kind of digital communication than they would have been before. And it'll be interesting to see how all of that changes when we get back to normal. An example that the fans probably see is that the Thursday press conferences, we used to see 4 or 6 guys would turn up in the FIA press conference, and then the rest of them were all done in a team, motorhomes, weren't televised, all that sort of thing. Now they've got this formula where everybody appears in the same place through the day. Will that stay? Has that worked? I noticed they mixed the drivers up, didn't they, last week? So we had cool things like Vettel and Lewis were together at the same time. I quite like that. It'll be interesting to see what sort of things stick around. I think everybody's got used to kind of doing podcasts and videos and that sort of thing remotely. We've all realized that that's doable and it's worth investing in a bit of kit.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. You've been obviously a great insight into the race itself, and then obviously I love talking to you about obviously your career. We could probably sit here and talk until the cows come home, but bedtime calls. But thank you very much. Did you want to promote the race? Any podcasts or anything before we head off?
Well, you guys have done quite a good job of that for me. The website is therace.com, and as Coops mentioned, there's a hyphen in the middle of there, or as Edgestraw says, don't forget the hyphen. We are just The Race on YouTube, and we're at WeAretheRace on social media. Come and check us out. Our output's quite varied. I like to think there's some fan interaction and that sort of thing. It's very important and steers a lot of what we do beyond that as well. So come along, comment on our website or our podcast or our videos. We check those out as and when we can. We try to drive some of that interaction with the audience, give it a bit of a community feel. And like I say, we've got podcasts that run every week covering F1, MotoGP, Formula E and IndyCar, and then bring back V10s. Be back kind of in the summer at some point when I come out of the dark hole that I have to go and do all the research in. So I need a bit of a recharge after the last one, but there's 30 odd episodes now. So search for Bring Back V10s, classic F1 stories, and you'll get stories from sort of the late 80s to the mid 2000s. And we've had some cool special guests on there recently as well. So lots of people to get their teeth into if they ever make it to the end of this podcast, because I'm aware that we've gone on for ages.
we have spoke. Sorry for keeping you for so long. So I will certainly be checking. I was certainly checking out your podcast, Bring Back the V10s. It sounds like it's a great listen. All that's left for me to say is, again, promote our stuff again. Please give this podcast a 5-star review if you can. It really does help us go up in rankings. We are on the website www.everythingf1.com. All social medias, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, @JoinEF1. All that's left for me to say is thank you very much for Sponge coming today, 𝐃𝐫𝐢𝐯𝐶 coming to speak to us, and of course our very special guest, the editor-in-chief of the race himself, Glenn Freeman. Thank you very much for coming to speak to us.
No, thanks so much. I really enjoyed it, and as I say, I don't mind at all that we've gone on for ages. Perfectly happy to have a nice long chat. It's been great fun. So thanks for the invite.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe in the future, if we can bring you on or some of your team, it'd be absolutely brilliant as well. We can try and organise something for the future.
Definitely.
Brilliant. So we are Everything F1. We are driven by fans for the fans. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.